Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome back to Nashville. There's no question that President Trump is large and in charge in the White House. Just ask the president of Colombia, who tried to push back on the migrant issue and then quickly folded his tent when Mr. Trump upped the ante with the threat of big tariffs. Or ask the leadership in Greenland if they really think they'll win if they go up against the president. But I suspect it'll be a much bigger challenge if President Trump tries to tangle with China. That there are great challenges that need to be addressed. It's a long list. The significant increase in Chinese trying to enter the U.S. illegally. 37,000 were apprehended in just 1 year. China is trying to undermine U.S. technology with the claim of launching an AI app for only $5 million. The Chinese spies who were trying to suppress pro-democracy Chinese Americans in the U.S. China's building more car plants in Mexico to avoid tariffs, again claiming that the cars are made in Mexico. Several states are now banning land ownership of Chinese nationals, especially near our U.S. military bases. The considerable buildup of the Chinese military with their eye on Taiwan and more of Southeast Asia. With all of that said, the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had an initial phone conversation with China's foreign minister just a few days after President Trump was sworn in. While it's surely helpful that they talked, the reports on how it went suggest that each side simply stated previous U.S.-China arguments. Rubio brought up the Taiwan threat, and Wang Yi reportedly tried to claim that Taiwan has been a part of China's territory since ancient times. Yeah. Which means it's our time to check in with our friend Gordon Chang. There's no one who understands how the Chinese work better than Gordon. Welcome back to our show, sir.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Gordon, you have often said that the Chinese are prepared to play the long game and will wait out Mr. Trump or anyone who tries to push them around. Can you start by giving us your overview of how the Chinese see President Trump versus the rather easy pass they seem to have with Joe Biden?
I think Beijing and Xi Jinping in particular are apprehensive because they know that there's a new sheriff in town. As they saw during Trump's first term, they're not going to be able to push the United States around like they did under Biden, where they had their way with the White House. So I think China is preparing for a very difficult 4 years. And I'm very happy that President Trump is willing to give them that very difficult 4 years, because we need to start defending ourselves, because the Chinese believed during the Biden years that they could do anything they want. And matter of fact, they tried to do almost everything during those 4-year period.
Well, it's reported that the Chinese government is prepared to take back some of the Chinese nationals who are here illegally. Some have been accused of working with Mexican drug lords to set up fentanyl production. Others are here to spy. Should we believe their government when they say they'll take some of these bad guys back?
They might take them back. They've done that in the past, but they're not going to take back the people that we should be sending. So for instance, we have seen some of these migrants come across under very suspicious circumstances. So for instance, Border Patrol has seen packs of Chinese males all with the same kit. And that's an indication that these are military, or they are Ministry of State Security, or they're some other officials, and they're here for no good. Many Chinese migrants are just desperate Chinese. They wanted to escape the communist system and live in freedom. We don't want to send them back, but we certainly want to send the tens of thousands, perhaps, of military personnel who have infiltrated into the U.S.
Well, President Trump is furious with the fact that China has done nothing to address the fentanyl problem. And as a result, he now has big plans for leveling the playing field with China. Listen to how he put it.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada. Until I was president, China never paid not 10 cents to the United States. With me, they paid hundreds of $600 billion or so, or more than that even, of tariffs. And if I didn't do that, you wouldn't have a steel mill open.
So it worked with China once, but could it work again?
I think that it will. And the reason is that China right now is in a desperate position. In 2018, when President Trump first imposed his Section 301 tariffs on China, China was actually doing okay in terms of its economy. Right now, though, the Chinese economy is not growing at the 5.0% pace that they claimed for last year. It's probably somewhere around zero. And Xi Jinping has only one plan to rescue a desperate situation, and that is to export more. And he can't replace the US market because we're the biggest in the world. So right now, Xi Jinping realizes that he's in a pretty weak position when it comes to negotiations and discussions with the Trump administration.
You know, I'm old enough to remember the Soviet Union, and I think the United States in general understood that the Soviet Union was a threat. I don't believe the general public understands that about China today. Why are we so slow to recognize the threat that China poses to our freedom and liberty?
That's a great question, and there are a number of answers for it. There are some Americans who have a direct interest in doing business with China, so they certainly aren't going to talk about a Chinese threat. But also, during the Biden years, the president in private discussions, he was actually quite candid about China, but he absolutely refused to have those discussions with the American people as a whole. And I think that was an abrogation of his most important constitutional duty, which is to protect the United States from foreign attack. So I would like to see President Trump have those candid conversations with us because, the Chinese are preparing to go to war. They're preparing to kill Americans. And we need to know that so that we can prepare to defend our society. And it's not just over there, it's over here, as you pointed out, with all of those migrants.
Well, and I think we have to help the people understand the difference between the Chinese government and the Chinese people. We can have compassion on one without embracing the communist Chinese government. Am I right on that?
Oh, absolutely. Because the biggest and the most immediate victims of the Communist Party of China are the Chinese people themselves. And that's why so many of them have tried to leave their country, because they realize that they have no future in China and they don't want to live under a totalitarian system, the one that Xi Jinping has been putting into place relentlessly. So yes, there is that difference. And when Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, he said that the one type of conversation that got his Chinese interlocutors more upset than anything else was when Pompeo talked about talking to the Chinese people directly. And so I think that's a real cue to how insecure the regime in Beijing is.
Well, the U.S.-Chinese relationship is obviously a big piece of our future. So we'll be back with more from Gordon Chang in just a moment. Tell us what you think the U.S. should do. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send the comments at alanjacksonnow.com. We're back now with the country's best informed expert on China and its relationship with the U.S., Gordon Chang. He's also the author of a new book. Your new book is called Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. In it, you describe the Chinese leadership actively working to undermine and destroy the United States. They're using a comprehensive strategy that hits every point of contact in our society. Why are they so intent on taking the United States down?
There are a lot of reasons, but one of them is the regime is insecure. It sees the United States as an existential threat, not because of anything that we say or do, but because of who we are. They're worried about the inspirational impact of America's values and form of governance on the Chinese people. And so they don't feel that they'll be secure as long as the United States exists. The other reason is that Xi Jinping has been promoting this idea of worldwide Chinese rule, and he understands that the United States stands in the way of his ambitions. We just don't want everyone in the world having to bow down to the Chinese, literally and figuratively. And they know the U.S. won't permit that, so they've got to get rid of us.
Well, there's one economic question that's making headlines now. Fresh news that China has been able to enter the AI race by launching an app called DeepSeek at a fraction of the cost of its American competitors, or at least that's what they're saying. China claims they developed it for only $5 million. In addition to hitting Wall Street hard, the app would be another one that collects data on American users for the Chinese leadership. Where do you think this is all headed?
Well, this is another TikTok, but only worse, because with AI, they collect much more information. It is true for all AI systems, they collect data. But China will do this, and they'll use it for malicious purposes, blackmail, all the rest of it. So, yeah, we have to worry about DeepSeek. DeepSeek was very impressive. They were able to accomplish what it takes us much longer and much more money. But nonetheless, remember, we have had so many revolutionary breakthroughs of kids in garages being able to figure out what big companies couldn't. And I think that that's probably going to happen again. You know, America's AI is not only going to be open AI, you know, Sam Altman's company. It's also going to be kids just doing this in their bedrooms, figuring out how to create the world's best technology for next to nothing. The Chinese just did it, or at least they claimed. We can do it again, and I'm sure we will.
You know, the Chinese government practices aggressive censorship. Don't we have to assume that if they push forward AI into the marketplace, it's going to reflect a very limited view of China, or at least the Chinese government's view of China and our world?
Yeah, we don't have to speculate. You know, people have run searches on DeepSeek, on Xi Jinping, on Tiananmen Square, all sorts of other issues, and they've come back with answers which you can guess. You know, so clearly China's views as propagated through AI are not going to be good for us. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic about the US, because ultimately our AI systems are going to be much more open, much more free. And I think that that means people around the world will want a freer system. They will not want something that has a lot of Xi Jinping thought in it, as they say in China.
Yeah, freedom really is more attractive than an authoritarian government. Thank God. Well, let's move to the new report on the origins of COVID. Clearly, the new leadership of the CIA is ready to disclose what is known for a while. Listen to the CIA director, John Ratcliffe.
The CIA has assessed that the most likely cause of this pandemic that has wrought so much devastation around the world was because of a lab-related incident in Wuhan. And so we'll continue to investigate that moving forward. But I think it was important for the American people to see an institution like the CIA get off the sidelines and be truthful about what our intelligence shows, at the same time of protecting us from adversaries like China if they caused or contributed to this.
There are more than 7 million people who have died, and COVID is still spreading. In addition, there are millions more suffering long-term effects. Many businesses were forced to close. Millions of our children had their key learning years disrupted. Should we just assume that the Chinese will never admit to the lab leak at the Wuhan lab and apologize to the rest of the world?
They will never admit to the lab leak in Wuhan, and they will not apologize. That's just not Xi Jinping's style. Clearly what happened was a lab leak. That's almost all the evidence shows that. There is almost no evidence for an idea of a zoonotic transfer. In other words, a natural transfer from a bat in Yunnan province to another mammal to something in Wuhan. And also, you know, it's not just the origins of this disease. The other thing is what the Chinese did after this disease got out into the Chinese public. They deliberately spread this disease beyond their borders. For instance, they lied about transmissibility. They knew this was highly contagious, but they told the world it was not, to lull other countries into not taking precautions. So this is not just a question of origin. This is a question of what the Chinese did after the outbreak.
In watching all that unfold in real time, the WHO, the World Health Organization, seemed to support any narrative that China put out. Do they control that organization?
They certainly do. And we know it because in January of 2020, the WHO propagated China's narrative of non-transmissibility, even though senior doctors at the WHO knew this was a highly contagious disease. So the WHO was a complicit part in this plan that China had. And let's remember, as you said, there are 7 million people outside of China who died from this disease. This disease should have never left central China. And by the way, that number includes 1.2 million Americans. Now, the number is subject to dispute, but any number above 0 is completely unacceptable.
Amen. Gordon Chang, it is always a great learning experience, and we have you on our show. Thank you, and please come back.
I certainly will, Alan, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We'll look forward to it. When I come back, I'll have some thoughts of my own about what we can do about this constant pushing from China. And later, your emails. Our experiences together from the last 5 years have been very insightful, but they've also been very different than any other time in my lifetime, at least. We faced a pandemic. China, the country where it originated, hid the facts from the world, denied it, did their best to cover it up, and they never suffered any true consequences for the devastation they unleashed on the rest of the globe. Our churches, on the heels of that, were told to close, and we complied almost universally. We lost sight of a fundamental component of the people of God, and that is in the face of great suffering. Our assignment as God's people is to serve the suffering, not to hide in our homes. Our schools were closed for many months. Then our children were masked. We know a bit about the outcomes. Now it's begrudgingly kind of leaked into the public square that there are significant learning deficits that we're still struggling to overcome. Then there were all these random instructions that were issued as if they were rooted firmly in scientific fact. Cover your face, even if it's with a bandana. Hey folks, a bandana doesn't stop a virus. Stay 6 feet away from one another. We called it social distancing. It's another random number. We put up plexiglass because plexiglass is the great destroyer of viruses. I'm sure you've got your own list. Well, I want to remind you of a biblical character. I suspect you know him. He was a prophet in ancient Israel. His name was Elijah. He lived in a time of great division in the land of Israel, and he called the people to account. He said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, serve him. If the Canaanite fertilities are God's, serve them." Well, I would submit to you that we're at a point of decision in our nation. Are we going to honor God as people of faith, or will we submit to the voices around us and yield to a secular culture? I pray that we choose to honor God. If we'll do that, I assure you there's more reasons for hope than for despair. We'll be back in just a moment with your emails. Thank you for taking the time to send us your emails. Your thoughts and opinions, they're an important part of our preparation for each program. Caleb from Tennessee wrote, "This was the second election I've been old enough to participate in. This election I've been far more aware and invested in the process. Although I may only be 23, I believe that my generation is showing signs of embracing a more biblical worldview. When they did a toast, everyone else had a glass of champagne, and Mr. Trump toasted with a Diet Coke. That really spoke to me, that we don't have to compromise ourselves to fit in with everyone else. It's okay to be outside the crowd." Caleb, that's a great observation. I would suggest that on most occasions, it's probably healthier to be outside the crowd. Being a Christ follower has always been a minority position. Jesus described it in terms of a narrow gate and a small road, and few enter into his kingdom. The alternative was a broad road where the majority of the people travel, and he said it leads to destruction. I'll take the narrow gate and the road less traveled any day. Kevin from Smyrna, Georgia wrote, "I love your show. The only problem is it goes off too fast. Trying to push it to 1 hour. Try pushing it to 1 hour. I bet you could get more viewers. I wanted to let you know that I watch Alan Jackson Ministries as well. God talks to me through it. Way to go. Keep it up." Well, Kevin, there's some discussion about expanding the program. Governor Huckabee took that assignment in Israel and left us all alone on the air, so to speak. There's two things to pray about. One is we need the network to cooperate, and then we would need the funding to be provided. If those things happen, you'll see an hour. Dixie emailed, "First of all, thank you for your great program. It's so needed. I live in Oregon, which is extremely liberal. Abortion pills are sold over the counter to anyone. We're overrun with drugs and crime as a sanctuary state. Yet our leaders are opposing kicking out the illegal alien criminals who are causing so much of it. Whatever happened to common sense?" Well, Dixie, I've got good news. It seems like common sense has rolled back into Washington. But that was only made possible because common sense prevailed across the heartland of America. And millions of people went to the ballot boxes and raised their hands and said, we need a change of direction. Now we're going to have to keep up our courage and continue to use our voices and share our opinions so that the people in Washington can recognize we're standing with them. If we'll do that, I believe we'll see a good outcome. I hope you watch the show every day. If you ever miss it, you can go to the YouTube channel and find the program. Some of you sent a message and said you were having trouble finding it. So we've given you a bit of a shortcut. If you just go to alanjackson.com/now, it'll take you directly to the archives of every Alan Jackson Now program. You can watch them at your leisure. That'll help all of us. Well, from all of us here in Nashville, thank you for joining us tonight, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.